Hi there, and welcome to this 1080 LinkedIn Live focusing on menopause and the workplace. So, welcome to our guests. We've got June, Ellie, and Kelly here today to talk to us about menopause. So, if I can just hand over straight away to do some very brief intros. So, Ellie, over to you to just do a brief intro to Speedy Services and what you do there.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Ellie. I'm the Chief People Officer at Speedy. For those of you that don't know, Speedy is the UK and Ireland's leading provider of tools, specialist equipment and services. And our people are the lifeblood of the organisation, and we're working towards being one of the best employers to work for.
Excellent, thank you. And Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly. I've worked for Speedy 14 years. I'm currently the Regional Operations Director for Yorkshire and the North East. But over the 14 years, I've held various roles in different departments.
Brilliant, thank you. And June?
Hi everyone, hi Sarah. My name is June Potts. I'm a workplace menopause consultant. What I do is I help organisations to understand the impact of menopause in the workplace, mainly from a financial perspective. So from absenteeism, presenteeism and leaverism, which, it does impact upon organisations and also individuals who are working within those organisations. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we've got lots of people signed up today. So as always, please do feel free to introduce yourself as we go through the session. Put your name in the comments, where you're joining us from. And if you've got any comments or questions, then please do ask them and we'll do our best to get through those. So I'm going to go straight first of all to Ellie and ask you, what has been your approach at Speedy Services around menopause awareness and support?
Okay. So I think, like many businesses, we've been blindsided to the menopause, the effects on both women and indeed on men. So women, as we suffer with the effects of going through the menopause, and men indirectly, so impacted through, possibly their partners or other family members. So ultimately, there's obviously a manifestation of this into the workplace. We have a committee called Plus, which is people like us, that is made up of men and women that would particularly focus on improving gender balance at Speedy. So we are a predominantly male organisation, so we're 21.5% female. And actually, menopause has been a bit of a taboo subject. And as we started on the committee, it became a massive area of conversation. So a topic that was felt to be one difficult to speak about in the workplace, but as a small committee, we found it very easy to talk. So we felt that there was an absence of policy, an absence of managers being aware of being able to hold those conversations with their colleagues, and indeed colleagues feeling comfortable to be able to talk about their symptoms, what they were going through, or indeed what was happening at home if they were a male that were equally suffering as a result of a partner or family member. So there was a complete outpouring, if you like, in terms of the conversation of the tiredness, the moods, the impact that was having at work, head fogs, loss of confidence, the vulnerability, helplessness, that embarrassment if they were to, break out into sweats or be particularly sensitive and burst into tears. So all of this was meaning that there were women that were talking about this sort of sense of feeling and how it was impacting them at work, but they were kind of hiding it. They were doing their best to not talk about what they were going through. So I guess that's where our Speedy spirit came into play. So we were a small community talking about what we could do to improve it. So we opened it up. So we went live and we did a Teams talk where I think it was about over 100 of our colleagues signed up, lots of men, lots of women, and just spoke about what they were going through, what they were witnessing, what they observed, and what they wanted to see the company do. And then there became this whole sort of sharing of what medication am I on? What's the doctor said? What homeopathic remedies are there out there? And everybody was sharing. So as a consequence of the Plus committee, a series of things then happened. We put in place the policy, which we've been able to communicate to both men and women. We've started to put together a training program to be able to create that awareness and be able to support managers in having those conversations. We've got a Yammer group where we are always talking to one another about, you know, what's going on today. I found this new thing. It's really great. Other people join it, can go on and get support from the other members in that particular group. We're having regular dialogue and discussions that, again, people can join, because today I might not be suffering, tomorrow I might be, in which case I need to be able to reach out to the group. So we've made some substantial changes. There's still a long way to go, but we've certainly talking very comfortably about menopause and really being able to support our colleagues.
Brilliant, thank you. I've just seen that Jo's popped up in the room, so shall I add her in?
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. Hi there, Jo. Thank you for joining. And we've just done some very brief intros, and Ellie's just been talking through what you've been doing at Speedy Services. So do you want to just do a quick intro to who you are and what your role is?
Yeah, so I am Jo Cannon. I'm the People Development Director at Speedy, and I am the chair of our People Like Us group, which I think Ellie was just giving us an overview of. Being part of that group has been absolutely amazing, and I have been overwhelmed with the engagement and the input that we've had across the business, not just from the women within Speedy, but the men as well. And people have been really open and honest with the experiences that they've had, which has been amazing.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That leads in really nicely to our question for Kelly. So Kelly, you're going to talk a bit about how you and your family have dealt with the menopause and how that's helped the working group. So over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So to go back to Ellie's point, I was one of those women that didn't want to admit that I was in the menopause. I certainly didn't want to have the conversation at work when it's predominantly a male environment. But I was also in denial myself around certain symptoms. And it probably came to a head when I walked in from work one evening and World War III kicked off, just because there was some shoes left in the hallway and a school bag. And I just had a complete meltdown. And it was at that point that I realised I had to do something about it for the sake of my family. So yeah, we embarked on this journey as a family, and ironically enough, I had to sit down with my then 14-year-old and my 8-year-old and try and explain to them what menopause was. And having a hormonal 14-year-old, that was thrown in the mix as well, which was even more complicated. Then all these questions came from my 8-year-old going, well, what's hormones and why do you sweat and why do you shout so much, mummy? And it's like, so we decided to sit down as a family, and we used the Davina McCall documentary to try and, firstly, for the kids to understand it, but I think more so for my husband. I think it was more of a shock for him than anything else, because normally in an everyday working life and home life, I've got everything under control. And suddenly these cracks started to show, and it was clear I hadn't got everything under control, and I was breaking down in tears. Nobody ever seen that before, and things like that. So we sat down as a family and we watched the Davina McCall documentary, and I think that was the turning point for us as a family. One, for the kids understanding it and knowing that it wasn't, when I was in a shouty mood or short-tempered, it wasn't directly aimed at them. They understood why it was happening. And more so for my husband, in the way that he didn't realise the overall detrimental impact of what it could have. He'd heard the phrase, he knew roughly what it was about, but when it started talking about brittle bones, dementia, that sort of thing, he was like, wow, I didn't realise it impacted that much. So it helped then. We pulled together, and the kids help now and do chores and things, and they know when what things set me off, so they don't tend to go down that road. But they're really understanding, and 9 times out of 10, my little boy will say, "Mummy, how are you feeling today?" He said it to me this morning before I went to school. "Mummy, how are you feeling today?" And I went, "I feel okay today." "Did you have a good sleep today, Mummy, or did you not sleep all night?" And I go, "No, I had an okay sleep." So he is starting to understand that that's rolled into the workplace as well for me, and talking about it at work has really helped. So one of my go-to people who I do talk about it to is actually a male colleague who was trying to cajole his wife to go and get support and help, and he's managed to do it now. So leading on from Ellie's point, the whole awareness, the talking, the communicating, the engaging has just brought it to the forefront, not only as my family life, but in the work life. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm having a bad day or I'm really struggling. And you know, and my boss knows that after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if he speaks to me, he'll get like a delayed answer, or he might not get an answer at all, because the brain fog just kicks in. But it's surprising how he knows that. So if we're in board meetings, all the important stuff, I mean, it's all important, but all the stuff that needs immediate action, he does before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because there's me and another colleague that just really struggle. So he tailors the approach to support, which is amazing. But I don't think, if we hadn't have come out and had the conversation and be brave enough to go, I'm actually struggling today, I don't think that would have changed. But I'm absolutely amazed at how many males have reached out to go, I'm struggling with support, or I don't know how to support my wife, or and just to talking to the male colleague that I talked to, it actually became apparent that males have an equivalent to a menopause, and it's called the andropause. I didn't even know that, and that's where I've started talking to some males in our organisation, going, how are you feeling? And I'm really struggling with this. And some of them have got health checks, some have gone and found out whether they're actually struggling, and is that what's causing it. So it's opened a whole realm of conversation that just flows quite naturally now, whereas it was always seen as a taboo subject and to be embarrassed about. Nobody seems to be embarrassed to talk about it anymore. It's very, very open and honest.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. You see that there's been a few really nice comments coming through about the work you've been doing at Speedy.
Yeah.
So that's really great. So we're going to go on to June's question in a minute, but just before we do that, I'll just ask Jo. So Jo, have you seen things that Kelly's talked about? Have you seen that represented across other members of Speedy?
Yeah, what's been really nice is that Kelly very kindly opens up about her experiences, which encouraged and made other people feel comfortable to be able to do the same. And I, as I said earlier, was overwhelmed with how open and honest people were, and how encouraging it was for them to be able to feel comfortable to talk about the experiences, and that it was okay to feel like that. So yeah. Kelly's experience mirrored across a range of different people within Speedy.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I've just noticed that someone's asked about squeaky feedback, so I can hear a little bit of that. So just for the other speakers, if you could put yourself on mute whilst June speaks, and let's just see if that addresses that. So brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so hand over to June now. So obviously Speedy are doing great things already, but what kind of things can individuals ask for menopause support whilst they're in the workplace, June, in your experience?
Right, I've got to say that that's a great story that you just told there. Sharing lived experiences is really important, and this is one of the things that employees can do in the workplace. You talked about being brave, Kelly, and it is about being brave, isn't it? It's about having that courage to open up. I also loved the male allyship within the organisation, because I think women tend to have a preconceived idea that men won't understand. However, my experience has been quite the opposite, as Kelly's has, in that men are interested. They ask questions. They lean into the conversation. They want to understand. They want to support. And I absolutely love the story about your sons asking how you are, and asking, you know, whether you'd had a good night's sleep. Because that's showing empathy from a young age, isn't it? And so that when your sons grow up, they've got that knowledge and they've got that understanding. So when they enter into meaningful relationships, then they will be able to support their partners. So well done for lots of things there, Kelly. But going back to your specific question about how people can ask, individuals can ask for help in the workplace. And basically it is about having that conversation, whether it's within a group. So groups are always the first thing. Setting up a group, as Speedy have done, with inviting people to come along and talk about their experiences. And it is very much that way, isn't it? You know, when you talk about HRT, a lot of people don't understand or recognise the effect that HRT can have. There are advocates and there are those that, you know, don't want to take HRT. So by understanding what it does for certain people and how it alleviates symptoms, you know, it can be a silver bullet for some, but others choose not to. They choose to go down a holistic route and manage their menopause through supplements. So having that conversation with others to understand from different perspectives is really good. But it's all about the trust element, I find, within the workplace, because menopause can be private, as Kelly's alluded to. A lot of people can be in denial, but also they don't really know, because menopause can often hit you by surprise. Without there being a biological marker, we can't categorically say, okay, at the age of 45, even though that is the average, 45 to 55, you will enter into menopause, because, you know, 1 in 100 women can enter into menopause before 40, and 1 in 1,000 before the age of 30. And that in itself has ramifications. But when the support from GPs isn't there, then it's often the workplace where women are struggling. And I hear in workplaces that people have been to their GPs 3 or 4 times, have not got the support that they need. And that's basically because GPs are what it says on the can, the general practitioners. They are not menopause specialists. So therefore, it is important for organisations to be able to support their employees. And there are a range of things that they can do through, you know, reasonable adjustments. So for instance, if you are suffering in terms of insomnia, you're not able to sleep, then you can ask your organisation if it's possible short term, because, you know, when you think you go through menopause up to 12 years or longer, it's not sustainable to have flexible working for those 12 years, and it's not sustainable for organisations to be able to offer it to every person. So therefore, it's about getting the tools that you need to be able to manage your own menopause as an individual, but being supported by the workplace to be able to function at work and be able to remain to do the job. So, you know, if you're not feeling well, a lot of women may go off ill. A lot of women may go into work and experience presenteeism, where they're at work, but they're not well enough to work as such. So what Speedy have done is they've built up a community where people can talk. There's no stigma. There appears to be no stigma within that environment. And so it's making those conversations easier. So I think that if you work in an organisation where there is menopause initiatives happening, then that's great. It's the ones where there is nothing happening, and that is within 72% of organisations, unfortunately, within the UK. Organisations aren't talking about the menopause. And also, for those who are talking about it, it's the actions that speak louder than words. You need those actions rather than just the hour, you know, presentations, because menopause is more than just an hour-long awareness process, you know, training process. It is all about putting in those valuable steps to really support women, and that's either looking through EAP programs to see what can be supported through those. It's about opening up these groups, as Kelly's talked about, and Joe. So it's those kind of things that will help individuals, and it's having the courage to go along and talk with other people and realise that, you know, it's a natural process. 51% of the world population will go through menopause. Yeah, it's the best kept secret on the planet, and it doesn't need to be that way. With tools and education, then women can manage menopause the way they want to. They can manage it privately, but it's the workplace that needs to provide them with that little bit of support at the beginning. So it's about asking your line manager, in one-to-ones, about asking for reasonable adjustment based on symptoms, but remembering that symptoms may change because it's a transition. It's a 3-stage transition through perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. So symptoms will change through that process. And so therefore, you know, what somebody needs today may change in 6 months' time. So it's having that courage and having that knowledge and being aware of your body and knowing, you know, what is possibly, you know, triggers. So you mentioned triggers before, didn't you, Kelly, about, you know, people in your family understanding the triggers and helping to support you through them. It's about understanding your own triggers, about stress management, because stress compounds the symptoms of menopause. So it's about having that awareness, and I can't stress that enough. And then it's about being able to ask for that reasonable adjustment so that you can work through the menopause and still be productive. However, it's looking after your health for the future, being able to age well, because menopause isn't about the here and now. It's about how you are living in your 60s, 70s and 80s. And this is what a lot of people don't tend to realise, because the decisions we make now about our well-being will impact on our later life. So
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Ellie, have you got any views on anything that June's just said and kind of the implication of what Speedy have done, etc.?
Absolutely, and you know, to touch on both what June and Kelly have said. So Kelly spoke very openly there about her boss understanding what she's going through and when the best time of day is to communicate with Kelly. And for everybody, it's different, and that's all part of having that open dialogue. So from an employer's perspective, we all want to get the best out of the people that are working for us, and we want them to feel really happy in the workplace and enjoy it. So in order to get the best out of people, so yes, there's a whole piece around competency and skills and engagement, but one area is particularly around well-being. And when it comes down to the menopause, being able to have that dialogue that says, you know, I'm going through a really rough patch at the moment. Doctor's just put me on some new medication. I need to start later, or I need to finish earlier, or I'm really suffering with anxiety as a result of the medication or the experience that I'm having. I don't feel comfortable attending a meeting. I'm not comfortable in attending in person, but I don't mind dialing in remotely. I've lost my confidence in terms of travel. Could I travel with somebody else? There's a whole host of things. And when we were talking really openly with the women that were going through these issues and suffering, there was all sorts of different solutions to actually mean they could carry on fulfilling their roles and regain their confidence and not feel like they were letting anybody down. So I think unless you do talk openly about this, and everybody is individual and has different things that they feel, you can't make those reasonable adjustments like June spoke about, because what's an adjustment for me going through the menopause will be different to what Kelly needs. So I think being able to talk to your line manager about what will help make you feel great, but also means the business will get the best out of you, can only be a win-win for both parties. I think the other thing is that we do have to appreciate, again, is that as you go through different stages of the menopause, again, what you need at the beginning will be quite different from the end. So a bit like when you do return to work interviews, when somebody's been absent from work, you almost need to have sort of check-in times to say, how are you feeling? You know, what's happening at the moment in terms of the menopause for you? Do we need to talk about making any changes at work? And actually, again, being proactive as the manager, because ultimately, when somebody has made a change for you and you feel really grateful, you don't want to feel like you have to keep going back or that you're becoming high maintenance in any way. So actually, if it's the other way round and it's us as the employer saying, how are you feeling? Is there anything else we can do to support? I think that, again, makes women feel a lot more comfortable about speaking about what their needs are. But similarly, now we've opened that conversation at Speedy, we equally have got a lot of the men saying, look, I'm really struggling at home. You know, I've got problems in my relationship because my wife's going through the menopause and it's causing lots of arguments. It could be, I'm feeling really unhappy because I'm just so tired. So again, for a male, actually starting work a bit later, if actually they're lying alongside somebody that's up and down for the toilet every 2 minutes and sweating profusely, actually we forget the impact that it has on our partner. So again, able to support all employees that are impacted by the menopause is really important.
That's brilliant, thank you. And that leads on very nicely to Kelly's question. But before, we've had a question in from the audience. I'm going to ask Jo, given that you set up the working group and you might have done some research, but if you don't know the answer, that's fine. So Michelle L has said, is menopause a disability? Do reasonable adjustments have to be implemented, or is it just best practice? So Jo, have you got any views on that?
I'm going to be very honest. I don't know what the right or the wrong answer is.
That's fine.
For menopause being a disability. So yeah, Ellie, Kelly, I'm not sure if you can contribute on that bit.
I can
That's
contribute.
fine. Or June. Yeah, June.
So menopause is covered under the Equality Act 2010 under 3 characteristics, protective characteristics, and that's gender, age, and disability. And there can be a combination of, somebody can be classed as disabled in terms of the things that happen during the menopause. So women can have thorax conditions that compound menopause, the things like that can happen. But there is a case going through now in case law, and it's at a preliminary hearing whereby a lady has been suffering with debilitating symptoms that include brain fog, hot flushes, unable to sleep. And because she has been having those symptoms for over 2 years, she's going to a full hearing for it to decide whether menopause in her instance can be classed as a disability in the workplace. So there aren't any cases as such that are classing it, that have gone through full hearing. So we're waiting to hear the outcome from that. But yeah, it is protected because there are certain elements of menopause. There are 34 psychological and physical conditions. Symptoms, sorry. So it can be classed, some of those can compound other disabilities, and women who do have disabilities do tend to have a more extreme and severe menopause than women who aren't classed as disabled. So it depends. Everyone's different, and Ellie mentioned that before. Everyone's different, so it does make it difficult within the workplace to be able to provide for every single person. And that's why it's important for managers to talk to individuals to understand what their situation is. But it is important for organisations to understand that reasonable adjustment is really important, especially for women who are suffering those symptoms and suffering over a long period of time. So no, it's not a disability as such. It's not a mandatory requirement under the Equality Act, albeit that there are steps being taken to try and make it a specific characteristic under the Equality Act for menopause. So it's not there yet, but I don't think it's going to be a long time coming, to be honest.
So we've got a few comments coming through. So Paul saying, fascinating listening to this discussion on World Mental Health Day. A lot of common themes. Really appreciate you all sharing your experiences. It's invaluable. Thank you. Charlie is saying, really good point, Ellie, in terms of the impact this has on both men and women. John's saying, having 3 females in my life all going through it, I try my best to make them feel beautiful in difficult times, compliment them frequently so they feel feminine even when they feel they aren't. Wow, so thank you for that.
That one's really lovely, isn't it? And it's funny, actually, if my husband had been here today and not at work, I would have got him to come in, because when I told him I was doing this today, he sent me a text saying, well done for doing this. But he did say, I think they should invite me on and I'll tell them what it's like living with somebody going through the menopause. You would have got some really quite frank discussion from him. But you do have to think about the impact it does have on your other half. So
definitely, that could be an interesting follow-on. And then Charlie is again saying here, do you think that it would be damaging to the evolution of menopause support for it to be defined as a disability? So that's an interesting question. Ellie, have you got a view on that?
Well, I think, I suppose you sit in two camps. There's one saying, it needs to have the recognition. So maybe employers that do have that kind of approach of, do I have to do something? Well, there would be a mandatory statutory requirement would actually help a lot of females that maybe are working in businesses where there are no support. So I've got my foot in that, on that side in that respect. But on the other side, I think, to June's point, if you look at the Disability Discrimination Act, it is all about having something that is going to last for a long period of time, over 2 years, and there are certain characteristics of it that then class it as being covered by the Disability Discrimination Act. So I think you wouldn't want to take away from that criteria, but I think there are certain things within the menopause and symptoms or other health issues in conjunction with menopause that would lead it down that road. And therefore, I think as long as you were to have had those reviewed by your doctor, etc., then there's no reason why you shouldn't be covered by that. And it's something that we will need to look at into the future.
Brilliant, thank you. June, anything to add to that? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's just, women don't want to be classed as disabled. It's a natural biological process that we're going through, and it can be influenced by, socioeconomic and cultural perspectives, and backgrounds. And that can impact on menopause and how people experience it. However, I, for one, we've worked hard as women to find a place within the workplace where we are seen as equal to men, or try to be seen as equal to men. If automatically when you enter into menopause, you have a label put on you that you're disabled because it is a disability, it's classed as a disability, I certainly wouldn't want that. And I don't know about, the other women in the room, what they would feel about that.
Yeah, Kelly, do you want to answer that?
I agree with you, June. I think the way forward is educating and supporting people rather than putting a label on something. I think we're too quick to put things and try and define things in boxes. I think it's just around education and communication for me.
And Jo, view?
I absolutely agree. I think just going back to something you said a little bit earlier, June, around those actions that were taken rather than just doing a one-off kind of talk. The bit that I'm thinking about here is how do we support our managers to support our women that are going through this, rather than labelling the women. Let's do something proactive and equip our managers to support their team members when they're going through this.
Yeah, and it is that thing, isn't it? Women don't want to be treated differently, especially at work. We want to continue as normal as we have done for the previous years, but some are unable to do so because they've got that decline in hormones, and that is a natural decline, and you can manage it either through HRT, if that's for you, or through holistic menopause. But having the toolkit to be able to manage it is key, and to being able to talk and have those psychological safe spaces to talk, especially in the workplace, for reasonable adjustment, to be able to talk with other women. They are just, they are so invaluable. And I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly with Ellie when she's saying, organisations who don't take action, it shouldn't be, do we have to? It's one of those, well, what's the repercussions if you don't? Because it does have an impact. It has an impact on everybody, as we've been hearing, men within the organisation, even younger generations who need to support their mums, who may have been going through puberty as mum is going through menopause. And so relationships aren't really that great. And if you put a male in the mix, can you imagine, what's going on in them households, the dynamics there? So it's really, really important for that education, as Kelly said.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on now to the next question for Kelly, which is talking about the knock-on effect to others. So for those people supporting individuals going through the menopause. So we have touched on that a bit, but Kelly, if you want to just expand a bit.
Yeah, so we obviously did the working group, and we opened up the talks within the wider Speedy, and like the team has said already, the uptake was phenomenal. The knock-on effect to that is I've had males phone me, and I'm sure some of the team have, asking for advice, asking, you know, I think I might be going through the andropause. How do I go about it? Do I support my wife going to the doctors? How in-depth conversations should I have? I've had males ring me and go, right, I've identified and researched that my wife is going through the menopause, but she's in complete denial. How do I handle it? And it's all different types of advice that they come for. It's encouraged quite a few of our female employees to seek doctor's advice. Some of them have been put on HRT, the patches like I'm on, and sometimes it takes a while for the patches to work. I was quite lucky. It took 3 weeks before I noticed a difference. But it's the feedback that's invaluable that you give to the team for them to have, one, the confidence to go and have the conversation either with their other half or with somebody else in the business. And two, the actual stigma that's attached with it, that I feel quite comfortable sat in a board meeting of which it's male dominated and there's me and another female colleague. And it only happened a few weeks ago where me and the other female colleague were clearly having a hot flush, and we turned the aircon up, then we went cold and we turned the aircon down, and then we turned the aircon back up, and then I put my fleece on and then I took it off, and the guys are just like, struggling today, ladies, what do you need us to do? And it was like the water was on tap, the cups of tea were on tap, they were absolutely brilliant. And I don't think, if I'm being honest, being in the business 14 years, 18 months, 2 years ago, I definitely would not have had that confidence to go, guys, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a dab on today, I need the aircon turning up. And they go, all right, no worries. And it's the support and the openness to be able to have conversations is phenomenal. And it's not just, like you say, an hour conversation that we opened it up to. These conversations happen on a daily basis. You know, I speak to other people, you know, in and out of the depots, in and out of head office, asking if they're okay, have they sought advice, do they need any help, how are you getting on? It male and female at different spectrums. It can be drivers, it can be engineers, it can be my depot managers, anybody. It's an open conversation now, which it never was before. So the knock-on effect, it's been like a domino effect, to be honest. Nobody is scared to have the conversation or ask.
That's really good. And Jo, have you got anything to add to that for what Kelly's just said?
I can see in some of the comments as well that we've got some questions around what advice we give to create this environment where we can talk about this kind of thing.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the one. From my experience at working at Speedy for the last 6 or 7 years, it's not been a case of just having a tick box exercise around creating a group around talking about this kind of thing. We've created a culture over the last couple of years where it is safe to talk about these things. So I think from my experience, that has come from having some really key leaders across the business who've been advocates and almost role models at Speedy to make it okay and to make themselves a little bit vulnerable and happy to talk about these things. And that has kind of caused a trickle effect where it's kind of spread across the business that people think it's okay to talk about this kind of thing now. So it's taken time, and we're, you know, I'd probably echo what Kelly's just said. 18 months ago we weren't there, but because we've had a real focus on people at Speedy, it's created this environment where it's okay to talk about your struggles and to be a little bit vulnerable. So that's how we've done it.
Brilliant, thank you. And to answer Michael's question there about what would be the first steps you would recommend organisations to take if they've not got anything in place yet?
I think it's about having those really brave conversations at a senior level. So we're lucky we've got the likes of Kelly and Ellie who have been brave and talked about this in a male-dominated environment as well. That's difficult, but I think you need that because that sets the tone for the rest of the business. So if you can identify some people in the business who are happy to put their hands up and be brave, then I think that would be your first step.
Brilliant, thank you. And Ellie, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you need to almost create a bit of a flight path for these things. I think when you kind of bulldoze people into doing something that they don't really understand, they don't really buy into, so it sort of becomes disingenuous. So for us, I think, if we rewind back a number of years, we worked hard to put in place a wellbeing committee. The wellbeing committee then really started branching off and identifying different things at Speedy that we needed to get better at. And that were affecting our colleagues. Then we had our Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity committee that branched off with people like us that were really focused on that gender diversity. And it's colleague groups talking about what mattered to them, having their voices heard, that then led on to, okay, menopause is something that is a massive conversation and we really do need to get on board with. Rather than almost starting at the top with the executive board saying, right, we need to do this, 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 and this. I think the community needs to come together and talk about what it needs, because I think that has had the biggest level of engagement rather than something being done to them. So my view would be create that flight path. If you haven't got something like a wellbeing committee, put that in place. If you are particularly, not dominated, because I don't necessarily like that male dominated, but predominantly male type organisation, then maybe then think about, the areas for females that are far more sensitive, that will be difficult to deal with in that type of environment. So I would encourage bring together the collective energy of the business to think about the priorities in terms of well-being, in terms of female health, male health, etc., etc.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And June, sorry, over to you. We're running short of time now. Any final comments? There you go.
Okay, so putting menopause on the agenda really doesn't need to be difficult, and it's not costly either, because a lot of companies have already got the model in place for mental health. And if you just layer over what you already have in the workplace for mental health initiatives, then it's because the psychological aspects of menopause, so the anxiety, the panic attacks, can link into that. And you've got a structure there because you've got your mental health first aiders who can then become menopause champions. And it doesn't need to be difficult. It's a very, very similar process. Because when we think about it, mental health was taboo and stigma in the workplace only about 6 to 7 years ago. Now organisations are budgeting to be able to support their employees. So it can be the same with menopause. And I do believe we'll see we will see that tipping point where menopause is openly spoken about, as it is in Speedy. They've done an absolutely fantastic job there. And it's about making it normal, providing that trusting environment and culture to be able to embed it so that, people are seen as equal and are also supportive of one another with that empathy. Empathy is so important.
Brilliant, thank you. I've seen a nice comment coming up from Mark here. It's quite long, so it hasn't blocked you out. So he's saying, love that as leaders, we are the gatekeepers of fairness. That's all we can ask for, a fair crack of the whip. It crosses so many minority groups that are just asking for fairness. If you're an organisation run by fair leaders throughout and are able to see individuals as individuals, your organising will attract immeasurable talent because you are giving out that sense of belonging and acceptance. Obviously, when you think about it, really. So I think that kind of echoes what you've been talking about. So thank you very much for everyone that's joined us. As expected, we've not got to all of the questions that we had planned. But if we just kind of leave with a final thought, I know we've not really prepped for that, but Ellie, have you got a final thought you'd like to leave people with?
yeah, just ask your colleagues what it is that they want, because I'm sure they'll help you in building the solution that's right for the business.
Brilliant. And June?
Yeah, I would echo what Ellie said. It comes from the individuals who are experiencing menopause, and that be male and female. And I don't think you can go far wrong listening, but actively listening to your workforce.
Brilliant. And Kelly?
Yeah, for me, the final thought is just be open and be brave to have the conversation. Once you have that conversation, you'll be very surprised at how many people actually feel relieved that you're talking about it and that you're actually openly having conversations, and that will start the journey that you can continue building on.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jo, have you got a final thought?
I think for me, it's around don't be scared to say the wrong thing, and don't be scared to ask the question how somebody is. I think they'd appreciate it, and yeah, don't worry about saying the wrong thing to people.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining today. It's been a really great conversation. I'm sure we're going to have lots of comments coming through now thanking you. So here's one that's coming through. So yes, thank you very much, everybody. And I will go through and answer all of the questions that have come through on the chat so that people can kind of read through later. And we're going to have a few more sessions coming up. We've got one about imposter syndrome, one about job search fatigue, and what stops people being active on LinkedIn. But anyway, thanks again to everyone joining, and we will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.